We got a fire alarm on deck 4.
A passenger ferry in a winter storm
Fire! We've got fire!
bursts into flames.
This fire spread very quickly and got incredibly hot.
Passengers and crew are trapped on board.
People were lost, people died.
Nearly all the evidence has been consumed by the flames.
Have you ever seen heat pattern like this?
What started the fire?
Was there something on board that shouldn't have been there?
And why did it spread so fast?
I said, I don't think we're getting off this boat. This is it, we're gonna die.
December 28, 2014. The passenger ferry Norman Atlantic is fighting its way through a brutal winter storm. It's the holidays, and the ship is crammed to near capacity with 417 passengers.
Nice night?
Captain Argilio Giacomazzi is keeping a constant check on the deteriorating conditions.
What have we got? Wind is southwesterly, 55 knots. Waves is 6 meters.
The Norman Atlantic is encountering some heavy seas at this point. It's not something she's not designed for, but it's rough.
The ferry is just 3.5 hours into a 20-hour overnight trip from Igoumenitsa, Greece to Ancona, Italy. And the storm is gaining strength.
The Norman Atlantic is a typical roll-on, roll-off passenger ferry, whereby trucks, cars roll on up over a stern ramp and make their way or are parked along the main decks.
The Norman Atlantic has 5 vehicle decks. They're packed with 90 cars and over 100 trucks. The upper garage deck even has large openings that help clear exhaust during loading. Leonidas Konstantinidis has parked his truck below. Now he needs a seat.
I didn't have a cabin, and there was no seating available in the lounge. The ship was suffocatingly full.
It's against the rules, but in the end, Konstantinidis goes down to deck 4.
I went to the truck out of necessity. It was the only place where I could rest for a while.
While he kicks back in the sleeper compartment of his truck,
Hello?
Nick Channing Williams and his fiancée, Regina Theophili, are more fortunate. They managed to book a cabin.
No, we're in the cabin.
I always call my mother to say, hey, I've got on the boat. And I said, I'll call you in 24 hours if I ever get off this thing. Being ironic because this was a very small boat in comparison to what I've normally traveled that route with.
All right, Hippo.
You ready for bed?
No.
What?
Mia Daltas is also on board with her husband and 2 daughters.
I always felt safe on ships, but I felt really anxious, which is unlike me. Phaedra, just before she went to sleep, said, "Mummy, can ships sink?" And I remember saying, no, of course not. Of course they don't. Don't worry, we're very safe here.
The captain is off the bridge for the moment. Second mate Alessandro Coronelli is on watch. He and seaman Francesco Nardulli stay vigilant as the night wears on.
Alessandro,
Yes?
take a look out this window. It's smoke.
The bridge crew think they see smoke, but the area they're looking at is 3 decks down. With the wind and rain, it's hard to tell.
You better go to the garage. Check it out.
The second officer asked the able seaman to go down. Have a look, it's down in deck 4. He has a little bit of a difficult time because the trucks are packed in there.
Seaman Narduli sees smoke rising over the rows of refrigerator trucks, running their generators to keep their fridges going.
Yeah, it looks like it's the exhaust from one of the refrigerator trucks.
He's satisfied there's nothing to worry about and heads back up toward the bridge. But on deck 6, something makes Mia Daltas wake up.
I just could smell something really odd, a bit like exhaust fumes, and the smell was getting stronger.
On the bridge,
What's going on? Captain, we've got a fire alarm on deck 4.
Fire! We've got fire!
Of all the things that occur on board a ship, a fire is the most frightening situation.
Crew call! Crew call!
they need to get a fire crew to deck 4.
You have nowhere else to go. There's no fire trucks, there's no firemen coming. You have to fight the fire yourselves.
Still in his truck, Leonidas discovers he's surrounded by flames.
I was sitting in the sleeper of my truck, and I started to hear something falling on the top of the cab like rain or hail. The cab is made of plastic all around. In no time, it was on fire.
We need the drenchers on deck 4, now!
The captain orders the next crucial line of defense.
The drenchers! Yes, sir.
Huge electric pumps force seawater through a grid of high-pressure sprinklers. The drenchers. But the fire is growing.
Marcus opened the door. There was a lot of smoke. There were people running around.
Mia, get the kids up, get the kids up.
Smoke is spreading through the ship's ventilation system, alarming the passengers.
Wake up. We're going to go for a walk, okay?
The team responding to the crew call know the longer it takes to reach the blaze, the harder it will be to stop.
If they lose control of this fire, then they have to possibly abandon ship with passengers in a storm. So the pressure is mounting to get it under control as quickly as possible.
Every passenger and crew member on the ship is depending on what this team can do.
Now!
Hold! Hold! Captain, we can't go in.
It's too hot.
This is the worst possible news for the captain. He needs to figure out what they're going to do.
Bring this in Coast Guard Station. This is the Norman Atlantic. We need help. We have a fire on board.
The ferry is in the middle of the Strait of Otranto. It's almost 100 kilometers to Brindisi, the closest major port in Italy. Brindisi immediately mobilizes its firefighting tugboats. They're equipped with powerful water cannons, the only thing that might suppress the blaze. Even at full throttle, it'll take them at least 5 hours to reach the ferry. Until then, the passengers and crew must face the raging fire on their own.
I was frozen. I said to myself, I'm done. This is it. I won't survive.
A fierce fire that appeared to spring out of nowhere is consuming the passenger ferry Norman Atlantic. And the crew seems powerless to fight it. Flames are shooting out of deck 4, and they're rapidly growing higher. The passengers haven't heard any instructions, but it's obvious to Mia Daltas and her husband. Their family is in danger.
We ran out, and there was no sign of anyone telling us what to do or what was going on.
On deck 4, Leonidas Konstantinidis needs to escape from his burning truck fast.
I couldn't remember where the exit was. I had to decide, go forward or back. In the end, I went towards the back of the ship.
Prepare to deploy, but do not launch the lifeboats.
Captain Giacomazzi orders his crew to be ready to abandon ship, just in case. The Norman Atlantic is equipped with 2 covered lifeboats, as well as inflatable life rafts stored in canisters. It should be enough to evacuate over 1,000 people. But the captain doesn't want to use any of them yet.
We cannot put the lifeboats in the water in this weather.
Abandoning your ship at sea is the last resort. It's a storm. There's over 50 knots of wind. The lifeboats are going to be tossing around in these seas. A very risky scenario.
Nick Channing-Williams and Regina Theophili are among the hundreds now struggling to find safety.
We ran out on deck amidst a whole lot of confusion.
Nick and Regina start handing out life jackets, but some passengers are starting to lose control.
The floor started getting quite hot. You could feel the floor warming up under your feet. That set in quite a lot of panic. I understand that people panicked, but just, the life jackets, they were being passed to women and children, and there were grown men taking them away from them.
What are you doing?
Which was, for me, very shocking. I remember it as just mayhem.
The flames were just enormous. There would be a massive whoosh, and huge flames would just fly up into the sky, and it was just so horrifically frightening.
The flames are forcing the passengers higher and higher on the ship.
Everybody just wanted to get up as high as they could.
My overwhelming feeling was, I don't want my children to die here like this, And I did feel like that was a possibility.
As the fire eats through more and more of the ship's systems, it creates a new problem. The engines shut down.
Captain, we've lost power. Damn it!
When the lights went out, I think that put the fear of God in just about everybody.
Captain Giacomazzi's ship is dead in the water and burning out of control. Then, things get much worse.
The lifeboats are gone.
The lifeboat and life rafts on the starboard side have been destroyed by flames, and panicked passengers and crew launched the rest of the boats before they were full.
The captain hasn't even given the order to abandon ship.
I think there was 3 lifeboats that went off empty. There was just chaos, utter chaos. And that was at the point where I put my arms around Regina and I said, I don't think we're getting off this boat. As in, this is it, we're gonna die.
Over 350 passengers are now stranded on the upper decks.
You could actually see the flames licking around the side of the boat.
The only alternative to the fire is the merciless sea far below. Some of those trying to make their way into life rafts have fallen into those stormy waters. For them, time is short.
You're in the ocean in a storm. The waves may batter you against the side of the ship, or they may simply overwhelm you.
On deck 4, the blaze has driven Leonidas Konstantinidis all the way to the back of the ship. It's the end of the road.
Once the fire started to spread, I was trapped. There was a wall of heat in front of me.
Then he has a stroke of luck. There's a cable dangling from the ship down into the sea, a possible escape route from the raging fire.
It was a choice between getting burnt or drowning. I grabbed the cable and went down into the sea. I chose the water instead of the fire.
By 11:30 in the morning, the Norman Atlantic has been burning for 6 hours.
The boat started to list. And then that sort of set the fear of God in you again.
Coast Guard vessels have arrived to start rescuing passengers and crew. But they can only sit and watch.
Rescue boats can't come alongside the Norman Atlantic. The vessel is pitching and rolling and it's still on fire.
We still hadn't got any closer to being rescued, and the floor was burning hot. We were wondering what's stopping the whole thing from exploding.
The firefighting tugboat, Marietta Beretta, has been running at full throttle since before sunrise. Captain Niccolo Maringelli spots the ferry.
We could see this very tall column of smoke, and we realized the extent of the fire was very serious.
Finally on site, Maringelli goes right to work. 46,000 liters of seawater per minute are blasted out of the tug's water cannons.
We tried to stop the flames from reaching the upper deck, where all the passengers were gathered.
The only hope of reaching those passengers is by helicopter. The Greek and Italian armed forces are responding, but even military choppers are kept at bay.
A helicopter had already arrived, but the smoke was blocking their visibility.
The Norman Atlantic has lost power and is essentially drifting. The vessel is not able to keep its head up into the wind.
Somehow, the disabled ferry needs to be turned and steadied to give the helicopters a fighting chance. The Marietta Beretta moves in close to try to attach a tow line.
We used the tow cable to tow the ferry upwind so the smoke would blow in the other direction and allow the helicopters to embark the passengers.
It works.
They drop down a round shape harness, which is quite scary. You only have to sort of lift your arms and you could fall out of it. It was like 1 or 2 people going up at a time. And bearing in mind we were a few hundred.
Mia and her husband have to send their girls up alone.
My husband and I didn't want to say what we were feeling in words, but I could tell by looking into his face that he was just as frightened and worried as I was.
To try and speed the evacuation, survivors are dropped off on nearby ships.
To airlift to the better part of 400 people is a large operation, very big.
After 30 painstaking hours, the last of the passengers on the ship are airlifted off. The survivors are brought to shore, and the injured are transferred to hospitals. One of them is Leonidas Konstantinidis, who'd been driven by fire into the sea 7 hours earlier.
I wasn't wearing a life jacket or anything. I only stayed above the surface because I was hugging the cable.
Miraculously, the wind from the storm blew a stray life raft right to him.
The life raft, the way the wind was pushing it, it had to pass between the cable I was holding and the ship.
Somehow, he made it on board.
If it weren't for this divine intervention, I wouldn't have survived. "33 people are presumed lost in the accident.
Many of them were trying to jump into the lifeboat when they fell into the sea. The still smoldering Norman Atlantic is towed to port. Gianluca La Rosa is an investigator with DigiFEMA, Italy's marine accident investigation agency. He wants to get a look at the wreckage as soon as he can.
We arrived on site immediately to determine the causes and circumstances that triggered the incident.
But investigators also need to help the courts determine if there was criminal negligence involved in the tragedy. Bernardino Chiaia is assigned to conduct a separate inquiry for the Court of Bari.
I was appointed by the Court of Justice to look for clues, possible clues of ignition of the fire.
The Norman Atlantic fire has claimed dozens of lives.
Everybody wants to know what happened on board. Why couldn't you combat the fire? Why couldn't you control it?
The answers wait inside. 5 days after the fire, the Norman Atlantic ferry is finally cool enough for investigators to go on board. It's their first glimpse of where the tragedy began.
Some walls on the ship were still glowing, with lots of smoke coming out.
They need to figure out why a modern passenger ferry like this one was somehow overwhelmed by fire.
People were lost, people died.
Thermal imagery reveals some parts of the ship are still more than 125 degrees Celsius, evidence of the fire's incredible power.
It's hard to believe that the deck, the metal sheet you're walking on, has been deformed so much by the heat.
On Vehicle Deck 4, where smoke and flames were seen first, the damage is particularly overwhelming.
All the shell from the inside was completely deformed.
From what they're seeing, investigators estimate temperatures reached over 1,000 degrees Celsius.
You could see on the steel girders the effects of the fire, like, suffering. It was almost physical.
Nothing left.
The destruction creates an enormous challenge. Investigators often rely on scorch marks to help identify a fire starting point. That's not possible here.
The magnitude of the fire was so great, it completely erased the evidence of how the fire could have started.
Some of the clues had been lost forever.
Investigators have located the ship's voyage data recorder, or VDR. It's clear from the outset, it's in bad shape.
On the VDR, you have the navigation data, the voices on the bridge, all the radio communications and all the alarms.
A VDR can be a goldmine of information, but they're designed to survive on the ocean floor, not in a 1,000-degree inferno.
It was damaged. The fire had compromised the black box.
Investigators won't know what they have until the lab does its work. They may get nothing from the VDR. Their best chance of finding out what happened on the ship lies with the crew.
The fire spread at a lightning speed.
The crew is at a loss to explain the blaze.
It came out of nowhere.
I noticed some smoke on the starboard side, near a truck on deck 4.
What Seaman Narduli tells them raises an immediate red flag.
Yeah, it looks like it's the exhaust from one of the refrigerator trucks.
Narduli saw smoke in the exact same area where the fire was most intense.
Seemed like the usual exhaust. Was no no different.
Electrical system?
Just electrical.
Investigators are surprised any refrigerator truck was running its diesel generator during the voyage.
Roll-on, roll-off ferries, they normally have an electrical system that runs your cooling system for your truck.
Investigators soon confirmed the Norman Atlantic did have high-voltage power outlets for the trucks to use, 40 of them on Deck 4 alone.
When refrigerator trucks are on, they should be connected to the ship's electricity. Otherwise, it means they have to run their own generator.
There's a good reason why diesel generators shouldn't be used aboard ship. Poorly running diesels can emit dangerous sparks from their exhaust ports. Not so bad on the open road, but in a densely packed hold, it's a hazard.
If the truck is in the garage and it turns on this internal combustion engine, the probability of sparks are high.
A review of the ship's plans adds more to the theory. There were 40 power outlets available on Deck 4, but on the night of the fire, there were 47 refrigerator trucks squeezed onto that deck.
For sure, some of the refrigerator trucks that were running were not connected to the ship's electricity.
Investigators now have a working theory about how the fire began. But how did it get so large and out of control so fast?
Look at the bird.
Kiaya and his team scrutinized the blackened trucks and noticed something unusual.
Have you ever seen heat pattern like this?
Never.
Look.
Significant heat damage at the bottom of the vehicles.
How it make like this?
It was very, very surprising. Normally, as you know, heat goes up, but what we found, it was strong damage even in the lower part of the trucks. We had some tires, the wheel, the metal part of the wheel completely melted.
Somehow this fire filled the hold with super hot flames from the top all the way to the bottom.
This huge damage in the lower part of the trucks. This was the first time that I saw this kind of damage. All the trucks were cooked. Deck 4 had behaved like an oven. This was unbelievable.
Frame 1, 56, zone 4.
We needed to unload Deck 4 and Deck 3 to understand if some prohibited matter was there.
Investigators wonder, was one of these trucks carrying something flammable, something that could have fed the fire and helped it spread?
It's really a burned jigsaw puzzle. We're trying to put together a picture. This fire spread very quickly and got incredibly hot. There needs to be some answers there.
Investigators study the charred wreckage of the trucks unloaded from the Norman Atlantic.
Fish.
They need to know if there was any dangerous cargo on board that might explain the out-of-control blaze.
Some trucks were carrying fish. Other trucks were carrying olive oil, yogurt and cheese from Greece.
All the makings of a New Year's feast. And nothing to explain the fire.
The exhaustive search yields nothing suspicious that would explain why the fire got so hot and spread so rapidly. Out of new leads, investigators must now pin their hopes on what the Norman Atlantic's voyage data recorder might tell them. But the blaze aboard the ship was far hotter than anything the unit was meant to withstand.
The VDR lost part of the sensory equipment that tells us exactly what equipment was operating when.
The unit hasn't retained any relevant data from the ship's instruments. So investigators will have to rely on the audio recorded on the bridge instead. They're going to try to use that to build a timeline of how the tragedy unfolded.
Alessandro. Yes. Come take a look out this window. It's smoke.
The first clue of the fire was some smoke coming out of the windows of deck 4.
Investigators note the time, 5:10 a.m.
You better go to the garage. Check it out.
7 minutes later, investigators hear a smoke alarm known as a pre-alarm.
There are all kinds of little alarms that go on a bridge, but even a pre-fire alarm is something that typically demands attention.
But the second mate still waits for word from Narduli.
Yeah, looks like it's the exhaust from one of the refrigerator trucks.
From the point of view of the crew, it was just the exhausting smoke of a truck with the diesel engine on. So they didn't care about this situation in the beginning.
Minutes later, the problem is clearly more serious than they thought.
That's the fire warning.
Captain, we've got a fire alarm on deck 4.
Fire, fire, we've got fire. Crew call, crew call.
But it's what investigators don't hear that surprises them.
Where is the passenger fire alarm? Huh?
By this point, investigators expect to hear the sound of an alarm, alerting passengers to the emergency. But they don't.
The crew knew what was going on, but nothing was passed on to the passengers.
It was a slightly muffled sound. There was not even a fire alarm.
There was a very low announcement, which was obviously something meant for the people working on the ship.
Definitely, the internal communication did not function. There may have been damage.
Investigators theorize the fire may have eaten through the wires and cut off the alarms. The result was chaos and confusion. The recording also captured another puzzling event.
We need the drenchers on deck 4. Now!
Yes, sir.
The captain ordered deck 4 to be soaked in water. But the drenchers weren't able to slow this fire at all.
Captain, we can't go in. It's too hot.
Something wasn't right.
I don't understand.
Why didn't the drenchers make any difference? To find out, investigators had to trek deep inside the burned-out ferry and find the drencher room. This is where the crew's last, best hope of saving their ship failed. Investigators need to know why.
In the drencher room, we were able to detect that 4 zones had been activated.
Each valve turns on the drenchers in a different part of the ship. Investigators check their positions to see how they were set the night of the fire and make a tragic discovery that they never expected.
Look at 4, 5, 6, 7.
A close examination of the Norman Atlantic's drencher system has led investigators to a troubling realization.
Let me get this straight.
It's clear the engineer tried to activate the drenchers as ordered, but
Valve 4 opens the drenchers on the deck 3, not 4.
the labeling system for the drencher valves was dangerously confusing.
When the engineer tries to activate the valve, he pulls the handle for the valve that he thinks it's the right one, and it's not.
The 4 activated zones were all at deck 3. The drencher never started in deck 4.
Investigators now understand why the crew wasn't able to put the fire out. But the most crucial mystery eludes them.
I still Don't understand the damage we are seeing.
Why did the fire grow so incredibly hot, hot enough to melt metal?
We tried to understand how the fire progressed, and we tried to find answers about how it moved around the vehicle deck.
They create a detailed simulation using all the data they've collected, an accurate computer model, complete with virtual trucks. They run the program. But it doesn't give them what they need. The virtual fire doesn't get as hot as the real fire did. It's more like a conventional fire.
No, still not hot enough.
They're back to square one.
Get me the photos.
But investigators haven't given up.
Okay, you see here?
They notice something intriguing about the pattern of damage on deck 4.
The starboard side, right? The openings are melted and twisted.
The damage to the windows is far worse on one side than it is on the other.
If you look at the port side, it nearly looks brand new.
The discovery suggests something significant about the blaze. For investigators, that one clue,
that's it,
unlocks the puzzle.
I think I know what happened here.
What have we got? Wind is southwesterly, 55 knots. Waves is 6 meters.
Investigators suspect high winds from the winter storm that night might be the missing ingredient. But they need to test their theory.
Okay, now add wind at 55 knots.
The computer-generated wind pumps a huge supply of fresh oxygen in through the port side openings on deck 4. It stokes the blaze to monstrous proportions and incredible temperatures.
That's it. I think we got it.
Investigators believe they now understand how the Norman Atlantic disaster started and why it spiraled out of control.
Okay, so it all begins with the truck.
Because of the holiday rush, the ferry's vehicle decks are crammed with trucks. There aren't enough electrical outlets to service them all, so several refrigerator trucks have to run their own generators.
Now the truck, it's running on its own power.
Investigators think the fire likely started in a generator on one of those trucks. No matter where or which truck it was, somewhere there's a spark and a fire begins. A powerful wind is coursing straight through the vehicle deck's large openings.
A lot of oxygen was feeding the fire process, and so from the first smoke, less than 5 minutes were enough to activate a serious fire.
We need the drenchers on deck 4, now!
Once the captain is aware of the fire, he takes action.
The drencher!
Yes, sir.
The stress of the moment and a confusing numbering system mean the wrong deck is sprayed with water.
This was a terrible mistake.
Unhindered, and with the wind constantly feeding it, the blaze quickly turns deck 4 into an oven hot enough to melt metal. In minutes, the fire disables the alarms and PA system. Chaos and confusion reign.
Passengers are terrified. They don't seem to have any help from the crew.
For some, the survival instinct takes over.
I will say it, there were people, I hope they can never look themselves in the mirror, because they took life jackets out of the hands of women and children. That was just an ugly, ugly part to that whole scenario.
The lifeboats are gone.
After the captain told the crew to prepare the lifeboats, some people went ahead and evacuated without waiting for confirmation.
Abandonment is only done on the verbal order of the captain. That's how it is.
Many of those who tried to escape on the lifeboat and life rafts died.
People who remain on board have a better chance of staying safe. I believe when the captain left, he could say, all the people I tried to save, by gathering them on the upper decks, I managed to save them.
With roll-on, roll-off passenger ferries in broad use throughout Europe, the risk of another large-scale disaster is real. Accident investigators know something needs to change. The investigators hope what they've learned from the deadly Norman Atlantic disaster can be used to save lives. In their final report, DigiFEMA flags the danger of vehicle decks that are open to the elements.
If you do get in a situation where you have a fire and there is wind, and this acts like a funnel, this is a bellows. So that's a really important thing, to go back and look at the design of the vessel and how that can be improved or changed.
DigiFEMA also recommends stricter rules and enforcement regarding refrigerator trucks running their own generators while on board.
The lesson learned is that it's very important to follow the protocols that specify how to connect trucks to the electrical system.
The court-appointed investigators issue their own report, criticizing the crew for the chaos of the evacuation.
We need to be sure that our crew is able to react fast.
The people who look after the passengers, they didn't have the training and the ability to manage the people, the passengers, as part of the evacuation.
One of Italy's premier marine safety schools, known as IMAT, has already made significant advances in crew emergency training in the hope of preventing future tragedies. It's run by former cruise ship captain Rosario Trapanese.
I remember when Norman Atlantic happened, something starting from a simple fire, turning into the major disaster. How is possible that this happened?
Government and mariners alike recognize that with better training, the fire on the Norman Atlantic might not have been so deadly.
I do believe that the incident is happened because they lost a lot of time. If you see an alarm ringing or a light blinking, and you don't inform immediately who is responsible on board, and you don't know what to do, and you lose the first 4 or 5 minutes, it's too late. After the incident, the company, the owner of Norman Atlantic, give us the entire fleet for train and retrain all the crew. The training now has completely changed the vision. New kind of equipment, new kind of facilities.
The new philosophy, enhanced realism.
We are creating a real environment to let students fight a real fire. If people is well trained, but is scared, they will not act properly. You can have the best training in the world. So people must be scared during training, because people need to understand what they have to face on board.
Training is no longer limited to elite teams.
The entire crew of a vessel train for the first time all together, from deck boy to captain, including all the engineers, waiters, everybody. In the end, they will have some of the most qualified crew in the world for that kind of ships.
Captain Trapanese and others are determined that those who perished in the Norman Atlantic disaster will not have done so in vain.
That loss of life has taught the world the people must be well trained.
For those who survived, the event has left an indelible mark on their lives.
My life was chosen to be saved for some reason. I think for sure there's someone up there that loves me and stayed next to me.
Once you've been to that place psychologically where your worst fear does happen, There's no going back from that. But on the other hand, we feel so lucky because we've also experienced that feeling of realizing that really all that matters is us being the family. That's a really precious feeling to hang on to and to have as a life lesson.